This is Zach Ayers, and you're watching the TV Writer Podcast.
My name is Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, episode 125 for December 21st, 2021. This will be our last episode of the year. I hope you've enjoyed all of the episodes this year. And today I have the pleasure of being with Zach Ayers. How are you doing, Zach?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, of course, you are an instructor at not just Script Anatomy, but many other places, and we'll talk about that in the interview. You in particular teach a pilot boot camp, and we'll get to that in the latter part of the interview. But first, I want to find out more about your background. You started out in Alaska, which we don't often hear writers of television starting in Alaska. How did that transition to here?
Yeah, Anchorage, Alaska, born and raised. Grew up fishing, hiking, camping, doing all these things that now in later years I kind of hate. When I was a teenager, we moved to Seattle, which is really my world, and that's where I learned how to be a city kid and kind of flourished from there, I guess. My first inkling that I wanted to be a storyteller was just kind of having access to cameras and in high school, telling sketch comedy to my high school classmates, and then just kind of embracing the idea that I could make people laugh through little sketches, Kids in the Hall, SNL, Mr. Bean. I used to, and it kind of became my thing. Zach's the kid who makes short videos. I used to wear RCA cables around my head in high school, like Rambo. Real cool stuff. And then my parents are from Alaska, working class. Film school was such a strange foreign thing to them. So it's kind of a miracle that they allowed me to go. I guess maybe seeing that was just my instinct was to do something like that. And so I was fortunate enough to be allowed to go and do my passion. Had no mentors, had no idea what it meant, what film school really meant. All I knew is that there were some schools that taught it, and the one that I kind of glommed onto was called Ithaca College in upstate New York, a state I'd never been to. I'd never been east of the Mississippi, And so I went there, studied television production, kind of learned how to button push professionally. And then my next big breakthrough was I spent a semester abroad in Los Angeles, which is what they call it, at Ithaca. And that's when I got an internship at a show called Malcolm in the Middle. Second season, Malcolm in the Middle, which, in retrospect was just a beautiful time to be on that show. Had just won, I think. There were a lot of Emmy-winning writers on there, and future Emmy winners on that show. And this was before a time when the writers' room was, examined and celebrated, certainly before your podcast. And so I didn't quite know what it was, but I found out real quick by sitting, at the desk outside the writers' room with the writers' room door slightly open. I'm making coffee and filling lunch orders while I'm hearing, these brilliant people tell stories in from their childhood in some kind of cathartic way to, express their youthful conflicts through these characters, and they all had similar interests in earnest character development and telling stories through action, and it was wonderful. It was like I was like spying on a Mount Olympus. And so when I got back to school to finish my senior year, that's where I focused on. I just wanted to be TV writer, not just producer or director. I think I came into film school around like the Wes Anderson, Tarantino time. So that was what I thought I'd have to do. But then when I saw that there was, this subset of storytellers who tell stories collaboratively, and they tend to be a little more extroverted storytellers, that they don't just want to bury themselves in the script. that was my jam. And so I did everything I could to kind of refocus my life towards that. And so after college, I got into a fellowship called the International Radio and Television Society Fellowship, Summer Fellowship, which is this another, there's several miracles that happened in my life, and that was one of them. Just not only knowing that it was around, but getting into this program. And what this program does is it takes recent graduates from around the world, communications studies graduates, not just production, TV, film, but also sales and marketing and PR and all that. And they fly you to New York City, they house you in the West Village, they give you this very healthy meal stipend, and then they set you up with networking events, I mean, so many that I lost count. And then they set you up with basically the internship of your dreams. Wow. And so, I'm going to New York, and what I quickly realized is that the other people in this program, of the people in the program, this is not like LA. This is New York, and there's 35 of us, and I'm the only one who's interested in the creative side of things. Everyone else is kind of into business, ad sales, marketing, the pragmatic stuff. And they wanted to put me in something like that, CBS News or something. And I said, I'm gonna shoot my shot. Can I work for The Daily Show? And they said, sure.
Wow.
So I started working at The Daily Show as an intern and /PA. Sometimes they'd pay me, sometimes they wouldn't, but it didn't matter because I was there. I was in, once again, right outside the room where everything happened. And, this was right when Colbert and Carell were leaving, but when Rob Corddry, Ed Helms, and the second generation Jon Stewart. But it was still a time when they didn't quite know what they had. They were still post-Kilborn, trying to figure out what it was. George W. Bush hadn't become part of their, daily joke regimen yet. And so I was really seeing this group of creative masters come together and find out what they were. And again, I'm on the sidelines, but I'm witnessing the whole thing, and I get to sit right off stage and watch what they're writing daily up on screen and hearing the jokes from the audience. And it was completely, it justified this crazy life that I was trying to live. And I wanted to stay in it forever. But when I was in college, I met a girl. And we had graduated together, and our life plan was, I knew I was going to New York, and she was going to law school. She applied to a bunch of law schools, all the law schools in New York, safeties in Los Angeles, just in case nothing happened. But one of them would hit. Well, none of them hit. She didn't get in anywhere. And she got into one place partially because her mother worked there, a law school in DC called Catholic University, and she's not even Catholic. It's this weird thing that just unforeseen circumstances. And so I was left with this crazy choice of, I love this girl, I also love Jon Stewart, but I can't have both, because I knew I wasn't gonna be able to live in New York and do this while she's in DC. And so I dumped Jon Stewart. I leave the show, right as it's cresting, right as the show's about to go somewhere. And I take my train and my $400 I had in my pocket to DC to try to look for work so I could be with my wife, not my wife, my girlfriend at the time. We are, and I'll fast forward now and say that we are married. We have 2 kids. She's home. She's really excited that this podcast is coming out. So it all worked out. But at the time it was, oh my God, it was really tough, because not only did I give up a job that I really admired, but I was also in a city that doesn't have much use for a kid who can write dialogue, And so I am sitting in my future in-laws' house, living with them, by the way, while my future wife is living on campus 60 miles away. So I only even see her on weekends. I'm getting up every morning, getting on my father-in-law's Gateway desktop and going on Monster and asking okay, who will give me a job in this town? And my skills, like I said, I I studied production, TV production, even though I kind of twisted it into writing, but I still had those, I could still push buttons for a living. And so I looked for button pushing jobs. And there was applied, oh my God, I have a folder of all the places I applied to, but one place responded. And it was a job writing, directing, and producing training films for the Central Intelligence Agency. Yeah, so you know, I didn't go hunting for a job at the CIA, but I just kind of fell into it. And it was a great job. It was, it took me, once I was hired, it was contingent on me getting a top secret clearance. Mm-hmm. So I got polygraphed, I got psych eval'd, I got a background check. You know, they interviewed my ex-girlfriends and like childhood neighbors, and wow. You know, got the whole thing. 9 months later, I got to step in and do this work, and the work was I think looking back on it, fascinating. But at the time, I had access to so much equipment. This was Iraq War era, you know, defense contracts, money everywhere. You could do whatever you want. You know, I got like Steadicam certified. I had my own Avid suite. It was a wild time. Yeah. And we were doing films that had you know, a direct impact on the world, positive and negatively. But still, you know, you were doing things soup to nuts, taking a lesson from a subject matter expert at the CIA, finding a way to make that not just clear to the student, but also entertaining. That was kind of why they brought myself and a couple of other people on to bring the Hollywood whatever razzle dazzle into these training films. And so that was kind of cool, but I couldn't help but resent the job at times, because while I'm doing this, I'm like helping the Western world protect democracy. My friends are in Los Angeles and New York, you know, getting coffee for Ving Rhames and Vince Vaughn. And I was so jealous of it, you know, but I was here, I was in DC. I got married to this girlfriend. She's going to law school, but then when she graduated, she was working at a law firm, and we just kind of slid into this life in Northern Virginia. I work for the government, she works for a law firm, and I look in my closet one morning and it's just blue shirts and khakis and loafers. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? 6 weeks later, we were in a car to Los Angeles. I quit the job, which is not an easy thing to do for the CIA. They really expect you to be there for a long time, and when you say you're leaving, there's a lot of questionnaires you have to fill out. But anyway, going back to that life that I wanted to do in the first place, right? You know, the writer's room. And so when I got here, it was still a time when there were still, your podcast still hadn't existed, and so I was a little naive or clueless about how to do it. I didn't have any contacts from Malcolm in the Middle anymore. I mean, I let them lapse. And I just set about writing my specs. At the time, it was 2 specs and a pilot. Maybe I wrote 3 specs. But I said, okay, I'll write these things, and then I will just like put them on people's tables, and then they will hire me because they will acknowledge that I'm, you know, a creative juggernaut. And that didn't happen. So, you know, I'm getting frustrated with the town. The town is, it was kind of a dreams getting diminished and realizing you're in like your quarter life crisis and you're not quite the person you thought you were going to be. And that's when I had another miracle happen, but it was born out of desperation, which is I started cold calling people. I started cold calling anybody that was even, you know, tangentially affiliated with TV writing or anything, because I have these specs, like someone please read these things. And that next miracle was an alumnus of Ithaca College is a writer, producer, and just all around fantastic man, Mike Royce, who now is, I think, one of the more famous showrunners. But at the time, he had just got off of Everybody Loves Raymond, and I think he had a deal at Paramount or something with Ray Romano, and they were just about to make Men of a Certain Age, this kind of 1 hour turn, dramatic turn for Ray. And he asked me to come on as writer's PA and sometimes writer's assistant. It was a kind of a nebulous job, but it was wonderful because I got to be in the room. I got to be in that room. You know, I was no longer getting coffee. I was getting coffee and I was in the room. So I got, you know, I was a man of many parts. But that experience has always stuck with me. You know, to today, that room was the most considerate and earnest group of people I've ever seen tell story. I've always been reaching for that ever since. And so while I was there, I learned a lot, not just how to be an assistant and how to make sure you write down the lunch orders. Otherwise, you forget to pick up Ray Romano's pizza. So I learned how to not do that again. But I also learned stuff about story, and in the process, during my year at Men of a Certain Age, I wrote another pilot. And that's when I got into the ABC Disney writing program, the fellowship, which was another like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And it was everything that people think it is, just an enormous launching pad for a writer's career. You know, got me staffed, got me repped, got me contacts, and I had gotten in as a comedy writer. I wrote a 30 Rock, I think. And because my pursuit was still Malcolm in the Middle, you know. And while I was there, I saw a lot of people funnier than me. And I saw a lot of people quicker in the room than I was. And that difference between me and them meant that I wasn't getting the jobs I thought I should get. Instead, I got a job that was available, let's say, and that was on a Disney Channel show called A.N.T, which is a great, successful show, also a kids show on Disney Channel multicam. I was in the room, I was at the table now, telling jokes, but it was like being 10 feet from the finish line and not crossing. And after I finished there, which again, I learned a lot, but what I learned is that the lesson I learned was given to me by my agent at the time, which was that when I left that show, you know, I said, you know, I had an agent, I have credit, I have material. I said, let's get me on something else, something more Malcolm in the Middle. And he said, you're branded as a Disney Channel show writer. That is your brand. Because I'm basically just, otherwise I'm a white kid from the suburbs. That's how he can sell me. And so that was just shocking to me. I didn't know how to do that because I couldn't go back to that lifestyle. It wasn't my forte. And so I had a crisis where I thought, I understood this is the reality of the industry, but it's not what I want to do. And so I thought about quitting. And then I realized, because I didn't brand myself, somebody else branded me. Well, let's brand myself. And that little backstory, or that little interlude in my life where I worked for the CIA, I had been treating like, I was putting it under the rug, because it didn't fit into the comedy writing narrative. Well, shit, I'm like a guy from the CIA who now writes television. There can't be that many of us. So I wrote a drama pilot, a dramatic CIA-centric pilot. And then all of a sudden everything took off. You know, just now, you know, I got new reps. I got my material out there. I swept the comedy stuff under the rug and started becoming a dramatic writer. And then getting meetings, getting staffed. And now, you know, I'll skip through all the staffing, everything I've worked on, but now I've kind of become somebody I've sold both. I'm fortunate enough to sell both comedy and drama, cable and network. I don't have to sweep anything under the rug now. And part of that is marketing, part of that is just gumption, I guess. A lot of that is luck and probably other miracles. But once I embraced that weird part of me and pivoted, like I never looked back, and now I'm here. I'm pretty happy with where I am.
Very, very cool. Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to establish that you can't necessarily do that at all stages of your career. I mean, I think to be fair, that lane thing is very important for somebody who's just starting out. But if you had gone backwards, what do you think you would have done differently in terms of finding that lane yourself or selling yourself in a certain way?
I think I would have. I mean, there's the easy answer of embracing the CIA early. I think maybe a better answer is I would have embraced the idea that I could write stuff that I enjoyed and not necessarily stuff that I believed people wanted to see. I think that was maybe part of my growing pains. And you know, it took me longer than it probably should have to realize that I was writing things that represented stuff that was on air rather than spoke to my voice. I wouldn't say that that's a hard and fast lesson, because I think it is important to always think of the commerce part of your art. Like, how is this going to make a studio money? You know, that this TV is an industry, it's a business, and you're not going to go very far if you just think that this is about you making your indie film. Indie film is for that. TV writing is a little more about dollars and cents. So I think that I spent some time working on stuff that didn't make sense for my portfolio, and in that critical moment where I was faced with, should I quit the industry or rebrand myself, I wrote the script. I wrote the desperate script. I wrote the go fuck yourself town. If you don't like this, then kiss my ass, goodbye. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah.
And that ended up being the script that really, launched a new chapter in my career. So I think that script was always, I guess, in me, but I didn't feel like I needed to go there. And in fact, I did. And I see that again. I see that all the time with my students, script anatomy, that it is often the writers who come to me who are at that attitude of like, I hate this doesn't work, I'm gonna give it all up, and then we just give it one more try, and it's that script where they've just pulled out all the stops, and they're just, I don't care if this is too violent or too esoteric, or you couldn't at the time it was like you couldn't cast it, right? There was, every lead back then was white. How would you, but people who wrote scripts that they wanted to see in the world, and writing them because they were foregoing this like courtesy of trying to write stuff that the people in suits want to see. That's when they find success, and so I wish I would have got there sooner. I don't really have all that many regrets.
Mm-hmm. Very, very cool. And so, can you talk a little bit about, because you said you've sold a whole bunch of projects, comedy, drama, network, cable. Can you talk about your development process?
I don't know if I have a process, because all those projects generally come to me differently. Sometimes one of them's coming through generals. Some of them have come through my own ideas. I think, do you want to know about the process of how I've got to where I am, or what I do now?
Well, even in terms of that, like when something comes to you through a general, what does that look like, and how do you turn that into the script that it becomes?
Yeah. I think this is, I'm glad you brought this up, because this is something, if I was going to hand out a pamphlet to people just arriving in LA trying to be TV writers, one of those trifolds would be about what to do when you're presented with a bake-off, what to do when you're presented with a general, and at the end of it they say, do a take on this. Because they don't tell you what to do after that. They don't tell you what that looks like. And so when I hear it, when I heard it, I also spiraled and did way too much work, or inefficient work, or work that, wasn't what they were looking for. Now, when I hear about a bake-off, I think of it as how is my personal point of view. I think about it as how is my personal point of view going to influence the way that the story is sold. I think that there are. Maybe this is just me, but I worry that unless I'm an EP, unless I'm like a high level, showrunner, writer who gets his name on a billboard, I should be marketing my take on this brand as something that only I can write. And so I think when a bake-off is presented, most of that work is telling a personal story. And I wouldn't just say, I'm passionate about, landscapers in Idaho because I think they're interesting. I would tell a story about my personal life and how I don't know how I shoehorn myself into this landscaping scenario, but like how I personally had a landscaper change my life. And that half of that work, I'm telling you, half of that work, and I would say 10 minutes is all you need for this kind of bake-off pitch. Half of it is your personal story. Half of it is setting up who you are, and if you're good at it, transitioning from the personal story to the protagonist story. That what you're saying is actually going to be related to the background of the protagonist. And once you're there, the rest of it is kind of rote. In the bake-off, the studios and the pods, they generally have an idea of what the show's going to look like. It's going to be an office comedy. It's going to be, a small town drama. Nothing you say there is really going to wow them. Or let's say you can't count on it. You can't count on your story chops being the thing that sells you. But all you can do is just basically play that pretty straight. But it's because it's the first half of it that's going to hook them. So that's my advice.
Very cool. Well, I think that's a good transition point. We're going to take a quick sponsor break, and then we're going to come back to talk about the pilot boot camp that you teach at Script Anatomy.
Yeah, fun.
avgearguide.com uses state-of-the-art technology to bring new life to old films and videos, like the Lost Betty White series Pet Set, which they recently restored for its 50th anniversary. They can apply the same technology to your documentary, film and video archive, and family videos. Visit avgearguide.com for details. DrivingFootage.com provides 360-degree driving plates for film and TV. Over 14,000 clips are available for locations all around Southern California, with more areas coming soon. A fully equipped camera car with height-adjustable rig is available for custom shoots. Visit DrivingFootage.com for details. Full disclosure, I do own both of these companies. By supporting them, you help me bring new in-person video interviews to you.
And we're back to talk all about the pilot boot camp that you teach at Script Anatomy. So this is kind of a cross between the televisionary and the pilot lab courses, right?
Right. It was pitched as, I think, an all-encompassing soup to nuts TV pilot process class where you go from the kernel of the idea all the way to a draft, which hasn't really been done to this degree in Script Anatomy. But it's always been something that I kind of wanted to have happen and kind of did in some ad hoc ways through several different classes, but never in the same class. And it's the first time we've ever done it, so we're still, I think it'll be successful. We don't know for sure. But the idea is not just taking you through the process from idea to outline to beats, or to beats to outline to script. But I think there's also a lot of benefit in being a part of that group. But there's 9 students and me, and we're going to be in it for 4 months. And that's basically a writer's room. That's a full season of a writer's room. And while we're not necessarily collaborating on a single story, there is quite a bit of benefit in being around the same group of storytellers for that amount of weeks, and suffering together, pushing each other, helping each other. That's what's really exciting about it, because script anatomies classes, televisionary is 6 classes, and DI is 4 or 5. This is 10. It's more than 10 weeks. So it's 10 classes. So that's cool. And I think what's great, and I'm glad we pushed for this, is that it's in person, which I don't usually do, to be honest. I like to do online courses, and I've done quite a few of them. But coming out of COVID, if I could say that, I don't have any wood to knock on. It'd be nice to just be in a room with other storytellers together. This industry and this job can be so isolating at the beginning because you just have your head in your scripts. But I don't know about you, but 15 minutes on the phone with a friend, another writer friend, or being in a writer's room for a day can produce better material than months of just banging your head on the keyboard.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've always thought it was really strange, especially as the industry transitioned. 10 years ago, you could write a spec episode of an existing show. Now nobody wants to see those. But I always thought it was a really tough thing for a beginning writer to write a pilot when they hadn't had the experience of writer's room. Like, say, maybe a more experienced writer who's had several years of that collaboration and seeing how a story is broken and that kind of thing, could then go write a pilot and use some of those tools themselves. But to be a beginning writer who doesn't know how to do that, I think something like this is huge.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I think that there is still something strange about asking a new writer to write a full pilot. It's almost setting people up for defeat in a way. But I think what is really more true is that it's setting readers up for disappointment. That the level is going to be low for a successful pilot, and so you'll be reading something and not think it's great, but it's better than everything else. Whereas, yes, I kind of grew up on the tail end of specs, where the idea was you're writing a spec of a show, and your goal is to write a spec that's better than any of the episodes because you have more time on it. You have an opportunity to kind of stretch the show a little bit, and so I think that's what you got back then is elevated, exciting episodes of the shows that you already love to watch. And now pilots are a little bit more. Oh, this doesn't work, but I can see that this writer has good scene work, and I can see how they've, can increase dramatic tension, and they can write to an act break and all that. But it's generally like, oh yeah, this is kind of a mess, but we'll hire him anyway. I think a lot about, as I'm not just a writer myself, but an instructor, and I think a lot about the empathy factor in all this, and the way in which writing is so difficult, and it's compounded by the fact that you are alone while you do it. And I think that as TV writers, it's so important to be with other TV writers. There's just a support system that you need in order to succeed in this. And then as a byproduct, you also need to network just to have people who you can hire later, who can hire you. Without that, it gets really lonely, and I see people burn out really quickly. I don't mean to go on a tangent, but the reason I like teaching online often is that I get storytellers who are just starting out, I've had students from Australia. I had somebody from the Azores once. People who somehow were born with this instinct in their head to tell stories in this very particular and peculiar way, and then find script anatomy and dial in the 12-hour time difference, over undersea cables, to connect to a community where all of a sudden, oh, you're just like me. You also care about Lost and strange, IFC shows that only aired once. I like being able to be the conduit for a community, but it's but it really comes home when those students, and I've had several, decide that because of the process, they're going to make the move. They're going to move to LA. And so this class is kind of part of that step that, if people have been writing at home, writing during COVID, even if you're in LA and you're just writing in your apartment, coming here and doing another pilot together is not just about writing the pilot, it's about like finding your community.
Very cool. And in this sort of writer's room situation, the people in the course are also giving each other notes, right?
Yeah, that's a big part of the process. Like I said, we haven't done this class in particular, but it mirrors, if anybody's ever taken a pilot lab at Script Anatomy, there is that element here where you're boarding your beats and you're soliciting notes from everyone. With me as essentially a kind of showrunner, facilitating things and keeping things focused. But yeah, quite a bit of it is the collaborativeness of it. Not only knowing your own story, but knowing your fellow students' stories and helping. Yeah.
So what can a person do to prepare for this course? Like, coming in, what would set them most up for success?
I would say that I'd say a couple things. I would say that I don't know if this is a good first class. And I don't just mean Script Anatomy. I mean, if you've written a pilot before, if maybe you've been to school, I think that's fine to be, part of some other form of education in TV writing. Good. What I'm warning against is that because this is such an in-depth, rigorous class, that I don't know if it's a class for people who are just dipping their toe in. This is a real intense class, not only in length, but in terms of just what it's asking of you. It's not like televisionary where you're going from concept to outline. It's just a short little road, and then you can see at the end of that whether you want to take the big jump and spend, all this resources and mental capacity to write the script. This is a big deal. So I would say that if you're know what you're getting into if you're signing up for this class, because it's a doozy. I would also say that in my experience as an instructor over, I can never quite get the years right, 5-6 years, that I very often will have students who are coming to my class with an existing idea that they've already written, that they've developed to a large degree, and then they realize, or they've been told enough, that they're stuck. There's something wrong with it. And so this is more of a triage, attempt to triage rather than generate new material. And I think that that's fine, but I would say that if you are that student coming into this class to try to do that you do your best to forget about everything but the thing that drew you into the idea, that you have to throw away all of it. Your attachment to scenes, to the way characters relate to each other, to a world. You can put it in a box. I don't mean burn it, but keep it off to the side while we try to rebuild something from that additional kernel. I see it all the time that people just want to reach for that box because there's something that attracted them to it. Like there's a funny joke or there's a good set piece, and that may be fine, but it's going to hinder your growth. It's going to hurt your process. So whatever you need to do physically or mentally to put things in a box, I would recommend that for the students coming in.
Very cool. And so you really can go from idea to draft, or do you need an outline at the beginning, or what is sort of the that part of it? If somebody's they don't have a draft, they don't have a script already, should they come in with several ideas, or because I know some of the other Script Anatomy courses, that's sort of a week before the class, and you kind of say, this is what I'm thinking, let's hash it out to make sure I have the best idea when I do approach the course. What would you say about that?
Yeah, that's kind of the case here. I usually reach out a week or two before the course to I usually ask for 3, but I ultimately let them pick but there's room to come up with a fresh idea after the first class. There's room to highly refine, the theme, the characters, the tone of a show after the first or second class. There's quite a few like ditch points before you're committed to a full concept. And so I would say that especially you don't have to have much at the beginning of this course in order to start it. I will ask for some ideas at the beginning, but that can just be a world, that can be a character, that can be something you're trying to say, and then that's what the tools are for, is building that little thing into a viable TV show.
Very, very cool. Why don't you tell me about some of the success stories you've seen in, obviously this is a new course, but in the previous courses you've taught, and not just sort of end successes, but successes in terms of breakthroughs in their stories and things like that.
I have a hard time, my students know this, I have a hard time accepting any kind of responsibility or credit for my students' successes. That's me being Catholic and bashful. But I have seen, there's the quantifiable successes, right? There's students I've had that, have been in fellowships, who've gone on to get repped, to get signed shows. Do I have any showrunners? Maybe I have a showrunner in there. There's all that. There's a lot of that success. Like I said before, many of my students have been online, meaning they are not from Los Angeles. And so I think that there are a lot of success stories of people who have just come from discovering what it is in their mind that makes them want to do these stories, to committing to it and to finding that community and then getting here, dropping their job as an attorney and becoming a PA. That's probably a terrible idea, but it's a success for me.
Yeah.
What else? Have there been anything in development? I don't know. I think there's again, I'm being humble to a fault, but there's I think people like what they do in their courses with me. Certainly have a lot of friendships. A lot of my very good friends are former students of mine, which is not a success for them, it's more a success for me. But I think there's also a benefit that people often overlook, which is just that at the end of my course, if you've done the work, you have a finished pilot by the end of it. And it's hopefully a pilot that is told from your point of view, is very close to you, is saying the thing that you wanted it to say. And what I like to say is your script should be able to light a candle in a room that you're not in. That script, that thing that you finished in my class, should be a good example of your ability as a writer. And whether that thing doesn't bring about, financial success or creative opportunities, I guess so be it. But I want to make sure that the students know that the goal is just to finish. And that is quite an accomplishment. After that, you can worry about how you can feed your family. But our course is about just supporting each other in order to birth this thing that is the hardest thing that I don't know I've ever done. I do it over and over again. So yeah, that's a tremendous success to have people finish a script in 10 weeks. That's incredible.
Yeah, very, very cool. So what makes a script stand out? You've had a lot of students over the years. You've done courses several times, and in your own writing, what is the thing that really makes a script elevated? What makes it like a room, like you say?
I think what I can say is that I can talk about what I encourage my students to do, and that I try to do myself. I can't quite say what's marketable at any point in time. This town is fickle as hell. You don't really know. I think what I look for as a hallmark of success is that that your characters are active, that your characters are flawed, that they are the ones driving the story forward in a way that is compelling and full of conflict. I think that there is a tendency, because of the way that this town pressures writers, especially when starting out, to find a hook, right? To like just go wild with your world, make it Game of Thrones, make it increase the murders by 10, do something very genre-y because that'll be the hook. I think that that's secondary to pursuing a story that is told through an active character's point of view. That's the thing that I often see is missing in a lot of scripts. And so the ones that do have that to me is a big indicator of that writer's future success. I think that, in the times that I've been involved in staffing, there's a lot of things that you look for in a writer, and a lot of things you look for in a writer at certain levels. That generally, and this is really more opinion than fact, but take it for what it's worth, that a new writer, a staff writer level, story editor writer level, that there are small things that we're looking for in a script that is probably going to be flawed. Like we said, like the pilots are going to kind of suck. But if you can show me that you are sensitive to telling the story from the main character's point of view, that point of view is interesting, that point of view is causing a conflict in the scene, that's telling me that you have the storytelling knack. That you may not have all the tools, but that starting from there, rather than I can create a world of rules for this show, and then we'll populate it with characters. That isn't as important to me, staffing, and it's not. I don't think it's as important to other people who are looking for those new, fresh writers. They want writers who are telling character-driven, centric stories, and that's really that's the foundation of script anatomy. That's why I like this, this pedagogy better than anything else, is that it's really pushing you, whether you realize it or not, to tell the story from the character's point of view. That the world will come after, but making sure that character is flawed and active is the cornerstone of script anatomy. And I think that is the thing that most agents, managers, executives are looking for when they're looking for new material.
Very, very cool. If you were sort of giving advice to somebody who was just thinking about a career in television writing, outside of just write, what do you think is the most important career advice that you would give somebody?
I guess I'd give it to people who are already here. So, meaning people who have kind of burned their ships and have started to make choices that have damaged their other options for the future and have really committed to this life. One is that it's something that you hear a lot, which is just you can't count on your writing to be the thing that gets you work. That you can't just be good on a page, you have to be good in person and with people. And that's not just networking, but also just being a good listener, a good communicator, good collaborator, and that takes some effort that many writers don't often want to expend. When we talked about my life story, there was that big moment where I had written my scripts and then I just thought I could just put them out and I'd get work. But it wasn't until I realized that wasn't working that in one of my most uncomfortable moments in my life, I actually tried to, asked for help. I reached out and tried to find a community, and that's what ultimately brought me, to the next level. That I think that writers coming in to this industry and pursuing this industry, they're often coming from another job, another lifestyle where they've spent their 9 to 5, working in whatever their other job is, but meaning not writing. And so when they make the commitment to write, they think that that's what it means. I just need the time to write now, and then when I finish writing, it'll be good. And I would say half of your job, that 9 to 5, half of it should be getting coffee with other writers, other people pursuing writing, even other artists. Just to not only feel like you're building a community, but there's a loneliness to TV writing and writing in general, and it's, especially in the dark like staffing times when everyone's getting staffed but you, the best thing you can do is be with other writers and complain. You don't want to be alone. And so I would encourage people starting off to keep up with that. Just start very early finding your community, your peer group. And I mean, that's what this class is all about. The other thing I wanted to say about a mistake that writers often make, early writers make, is thinking, this is hard to take, but thinking that your writing is going to pay the bills. I cannot encourage writers enough to get a side hustle and stick with it as long as you can. It is going to, even after you get your first staff job, the money is great, but then it just goes away. You're working 10 weeks with, doing this 14 weeks, and then you're done. And the worst feelings I've had in my career as a TV writer is resenting it. Is that feeling that I have the talent now, I have the contacts, but I just can't afford it anymore. And that is that can be avoided by just making sure that you keep up your barista license, that you teach at Script Anatomy, that you have other skills that you can fall back on. Not to the point where you're losing all your time for writing, but just so you can sustain yourself. Early on, when people ask me what to do when they move here, how do they get a job in the industry, the first thing I tell them is go work in a restaurant, get a job, because get a job that can pay your bills and sustain you here, because it may take years. I mean, it may take most of your career to get to a place where your only source of income is TV writing. So really find a way to have fallback moments where you can still stay here even if you're not getting the career opportunities that you want, because you are still, every day that you're here, you're getting better as a writer, you're progressing in your career. Not all those days are paid. So just a way that you can sustain yourself is I think the critical piece of advice for people starting off in TV.
And I think it's not like it used to be. I know there's a lot of people who got their first staff gig. The seasons were longer, 20, 22 episodes, and shows went longer than they do now. I think you need to be frugal. Don't go buy that sports car after your first paycheck comes in.
100%. Yeah, and I mean the residuals aren't as good as they used to be. The orders aren't as good. The orders aren't as good. Mini rooms are everywhere. You're getting paid scale. There's so many opportunities for you to feel like you're getting screwed in this industry. So just find a way to live in Los Angeles with or without that TV money. That TV money's sweet, but yeah, squirrel away and stir a lot of different pots.
Very, very cool. Well, we're going to start to wrap things up here. You're Zach Tells Lies on Twitter?
I mean, yeah, I guess so. I don't really tweet. Feel free to DM me. I'm on Instagram as Zach Tells Lies, at Zach Tells Lies as well. If you want to contact me, it's zach@scriptanatomy.com. That's the best way to get to me.
Very cool. And it sounds like this course, this pilot boot camp, is a really, really excellent course as long as you've got a little bit of writing experience already. I love the idea that from start to finish you come out with a fully realized pilot script.
Thank you. I do too.
So definitely look up the course at scriptanatomy.com. And I would say these courses fill very fast, but they reoccur throughout the year. So keep an eye on that calendar at scriptanatomy.com and make sure that you book early if you want to get into this class. But thanks so much, Zach. This has been a great interview. Appreciate you taking the time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Please follow me on Twitter for the latest updates. @GrayJones is my handle. Make sure to bookmark tvwriterpodcast.com and scriptmag.com. You can find the video version of this podcast at iTunes, Podbean, and on YouTube. Make sure you do subscribe to all these places. Audio only, you can find us at iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or Pandora. And on Instagram, you can follow @TVWriterPodcast. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.